another video here at Blue Glow Electronics. This one's a little different today. Instead of me being the quasi-expert and explaining something to you guys, I'm actually making this video to hopefully get some help online. It's an interesting little solid brass box from 1929. If you come around on the back side of it here, you can see it'll tell you 100 to 120 volts, 50 to 60 cycles. You got some inputs, some outputs, some monitor, battery, radio receive, etc. And trying to figure out what this thing is. Honestly, I've been looking online and there's not a lot of info out there. I can tell you from the what you can see here, it is a Western Electric 32A amplifier. And then there is almost no info online about these things. Runs 3 type 231 tubes here at the top. Nice little 75 milliamp Western Electric meter here on it. You got a 2 rheostats here for filament and for the volume. And you got some some buttons and levers here for various things that I've yet to figure out what. Anyway, this is a neat little unit, I have to say. I picked it up yesterday at the Charlotte Ham Fest off a guy. And if you look here, it's got the schematic, full-blown schematic here in the top. And we'll show you more of that online here in a minute. But the only thing I've really been able to find online about this thing, a schematic, you can find that online. The Radio Museum has a picture of one, but really no info on what it is. As I start dissecting, I made a parts list of all the major components inside this thing. As I started researching those, I started finding a little more info, not necessarily about the 32A, but about those parts and what they were used for, etc. I did find one little post out there. Someone said maybe it was a radio station monitor of some sort, but regardless, it definitely is a 32A, and it is definitely an audio amplifier, is exactly what it is. So let me take a couple screws out and show you inside this thing. Okay, as you can see here, I took the 4 screws out of the front of this, and this little plate then will, if you get it right here, will just lift right off. We'll set it aside, and you can see in here there's a couple transformers here, and then the beauty arises here. So this is a pair of 205D Western Electric output tubes, triodes, single-ended, directly heated. And looking at the schematic, one of these is used as a half-wave rectifier, and the other is actually the output tube here. And then you've got the 2 Western Electric sockets mounted down below that. And then over here on this side, this one works a little different. If I can get it to, let me set the camera down. Alright, as you can see here, you lift this thing up and it is mammoth. Look at the solid brass rheostats there. Those things are massive. The resistors and the condensers here and this things are huge. Then you dive down in here and you've got several different input transformers here, and we'll look those up more. You've got more capacitors, condensers here, a bunch of various sizes, another choke, and then you got the inputs there. But this thing is just massive in size and shape, as you can see here. Huge heavy brass hinge on this thing. The whole box is brass, oddly enough. It's should have a locking mechanism over there that I haven't locked yet, but you can see here this thing is it's pretty massive in itself. I want to try to get the 205s out and test them. Hopefully they're good, because that would be a big piece of value. I know that 2 of these tubes here are in really good shape, and these are the Western Electric engraved base tubes. So if I can get one out here. Yeah, you can see here 205Ds here engraved. But a nice pair of these, if they test good, somewhere between $1,600, $1,700, maybe $1,500, but several have sold on eBay recently in that $1,600 range for a pair. And then these input transformers and the output transformers, I'll have to find out what they are, a little more about them. I'll show you that in a spreadsheet I built, but I'm just trying to figure out what the heck this thing was originally used for. What was its designed purpose? I mean, there's certainly a lot of good vintage Western Electric parts here in this thing, but trying to find out more info. Would love some input and feedback from it's interesting as you look at some of the transformers in this thing, what I would call interstage transformers. What you kind of find is they're highly sought after. They all seem to be overseas in a kind of a Asian market of some sort or another, and they may have been used in multiple different amplifiers. We'll take a look at that. Yeah, there's the pair of tubes both out, and went over here and looked up on my Cardomatic that has the computerized kit to it, and it said it can test it in this tube here, but I want to do some validation on the pins, make sure I'm getting those in right. Okay, the first thing I found online was a Western Electric 32A schematic, and this schematic has more detail to it than the previous schematic glued into the back of the amplifier. And I noticed this little line right here, this dotted line. Everything to the right of this over here is kind of what's on the right hand side of that amplifier where I took the metal plate off. Everything to the left of this side is kind of where I flipped open that it looked like an old 1/4 inch thick Bakelite panel. And so this over here, it says it's a D80924 amplifier, and this all this on the left hand side then is part of the input. So what you got here, first you find a 233-E input transformer. It's 200 ohms to 25k ohms. You come down through here and you find a 130A-A, it says RET coil, which stands for retard coil, which is the same, we know those today as plate coils, or plate chokes. And then down here you have another input transformer, which is the 233-D, 20k ohms to 50k ohms, which would be by most standards considered a interstage transformer. Both of these would be. As you kind of move on along, you find the 231D here tubes, which otherwise known as type 31 tubes. Lots of resistors and capacitors here along the way, and various input jacks. Here's a rheostat for the volume. There's that the 75 milliamp meter on the face of this thing. As you kind of move along, then you get to here you got another 113A -A choke coil. You've also got a 226G input transformer, which is 20k ohms to 133k ohms. Then you got an output transformer, 120G, which is 4,000 ohms to 2,000 ohms. You'll notice here you got a power transformer right here, which is listed as the 90B coil. Then your first 205D, which if you'll notice here is being ran as a half-wave rectifier. Then up here you'll have the other half of this, which the other 205, which is actually being ran as a true triode in an output amplifier section. And it talks a little bit about, for various scenarios, strapping some outputs. But interesting schematic. Let me show you a few other little bits and pieces I found online. Okay, up next here on the Radio Museum. You're probably familiar with these guys, but they've got a picture of one out here, and they've got a schematic. You can get a copy of it. But it tells you that it uses the 3 231Ds and 2 205Ds, and it doesn't say much else. Loudspeaker for headphones or amp. Rider schematic has an error. And that's about it. There's not much else info here on this thing. So, wow, what do you do? Okay, so what I did next was I took and just basically made a spreadsheet out of the schematic here. So the two 205D tubes, Western Electric output tube, it's got one 113A, the plate choke, one 233E input choke, it's got one 233D input transformer. Everything I read said it was an amazing interstage. Got this 130A retard coil, the 90B rep coil, the 226 input transformer, and the 120G output transformer. And I found info on all of these except for the orange ones. I can't find any kind of info or pricing on those. And I'll I'll show you a little bit of pricing online here of what I found for these things. Okay, up next, I just did some searching on these individual parts, and what I'm throwing up here, just take with a grain of salt. These may be sold prices in some cases. These may be asking prices, and you know how those things go. But it should give you some relative idea. Is this thing got some nice components in it, or valuable, or highly sought after, or not? But I found this Western Electric 32A amplifier, transformer 226G. And if you actually click on it here, it'll take you over, and you end up finding this thing here is it's pretty crazy, and it's a nice picture of it. And this thing is 246,000 yen, which equates to $2,192. So have no idea if this thing is worth this, but they don't really say much about it here. They have a nice picture of it, but and just that's kind of what I found thus far on one item there. Kind of click along to the next item here, you'll find the 113A recharge coil, and this one actually was a sold item. You see it had 11 bids, and it went for $364 US dollars. So quite interesting there on that. Then I found the 233 input transformer here on a site, and 500,000 yen, otherwise known as $4,495. Don't have a clue whether these things are worth that, but that's what someone overseas in Japan is asking for one of these. Up next, this is pretty good. You found here at Western Labo the 233D Interstage. Shows some nice pictures of this thing. Come along, and then they're asking 2,880 yen, which when I did the math on that is about $2,446. So a little bit crazy there on the prices I was seeing of stuff. Okay, so what I did next was I took all the prices I found online and I kind of keyed them in here. Like I say, some of them sold prices, which, you know, that's definitely lots of these 205 output tubes sold in that range. There's no question about that value. And I just kind of keyed them in, and you start adding it up, and all of a sudden you're here at $11,000 worth of parts in this thing. And hey, maybe it's not worth a third of that, but a third of that would still be, you know, a couple $1,000s. Crazy what this old stuff goes for. And I didn't even price out any of the capacitors, rheostats, inputs, you know, jacks or whatever. And then maybe it's worth more collectively as a whole, as a solid, you know, put together unit than it is the pieces. A lot of times you find on older stuff like this may be worth more as a parts, but either way, I'm not going to tear this thing apart, regardless of the value. Even if it had been 3 times this, I would just still stick it on a shelf and leave it intact. But I thought it was an interesting endeavor to kind of see what some of this stuff actually is bringing, or asking, I should say, online. Thought I'd show you the schematic on the actual back, you know, inside plate of cover of the amplifier. A lot less detail. You can see here, like it shows the transformer, but not the input and output impedances here. Fairly simple schematic at this point. One thing, I did Google the D80924 amplifier, came up zilch. So there's really not a lot of info on this being a separate unit from the 32A, or a different component. I thought it was neat the way you plug this into this is via that little cable that was on the front of the amplifier. It actually connected the two halves of the amplifier. Anyways, hopefully I learned a little something there. I know I am. I'm figuring this thing out as we go. And love this huge brass hinge that locks right here. I mean, this is just the epitome of American engineering. Electrical engineering is this old Western Electric stuff. Really proud to have this in my collection. You know, even if these things here turn out to be, you know, really expensive input transformers, or interstage transformers, and I'm sure these capacitors and whatnot are of significant value as well. I don't think I'll part it out. You know, it's just too neat of a unit to keep together. Probably never find anything else that like it again around here, and proud to have it in the collection. Let me know what you think this thing is. Love your feedback.